dear. Right, I'm just going to press on, and this is the last presentation before lunch, so I'm going to try and get through it really quickly so you can spend more time pushing food into your face instead of sitting down and listening. Anyway, so my name's James Adam, and the talk that I've agreed to give is called Gem That. And when I kind of look back at the title that I'd agreed, I kind of felt like the slide should be more like, wow, Gem That! But realistically what it's going to be is a hopefully constructive rant, and then what I rant, not rant, and then what I did about it, i.e. gem this, and then a little bit of information about writing gem commands, and that'll be enough, and then we get to go and eat lunch. But anyway, before we get into any of that, it's probably worth just having a quick primer about building gems in general, because actually it's not that complicated, but when we have a look at some of the tools that exist, you'd be forgiven for thinking that it was some kind of rocket science. So in its simplest form, building a gem is really just a case of writing a gem spec file, and this is just Ruby code. And inside it describes the name of the gem, the version, the files that the gem includes, any dependencies that the gem has, and so on. And then once you have this, you just use the gem build command to compile that gem spec into an actual gem, and then you have the gem file there. And this is all built into Ruby gems, so you can build gems without any of these tools. And it's not even that hard, but apparently some people like some more things. Anyway, so this is really how simple it is, and everything else is layered on top of that. And the second thing that I should explain before we get into the meat is kind of my motivation for giving this talk. So as a developer, I'm kind of quite often when I'm not doing client work, or when I should be doing client work or whatever, I'm fiddling away with some library or some idea that I have, and I might work on it and leave it and then come back to it. And it has a life of its own. And occasionally, not terribly often, but occasionally I'll think, oh right, yeah, this is suitable for other people to use, so I want to turn this, what I've already written, into a gem, and then make it available on Ruby Forge or Gem Cutter or whatever. So what I'm really looking for, the basis of all the bile that's going to come out in the next 10 minutes, is I want a tool that is going to support me in doing that. Right? Okay, so what can I do? Well, the first tool that you probably would look at is Ho, which is kind of the granddaddy of gem creation. It's been around for ages. It's written by a Ruby Nazi called Ryan Davis, who is a very angry person, or it certainly seems that way. And it provides a command that will do loads of stuff for you. So let's have a look and see what happens when we actually run that. Okay, wow. Right, immediately there's a ton of stuff in there, and I almost don't even know where to start. Like, it's created an auto-test file and a manifest and everything, and it's still not actually even finished because it goes on, right? So now it's finished, and it's kind of said, all right, now fix all of this stuff. And so it's given me like a project which needs to be fixed. I'm inheriting a bunch of debt that I need to sort out before I can actually go ahead with like releasing my gem. And even with that, what is this manifest? It doesn't make any sense. Do I have to use auto-test? Who knows? Okay, so maybe, well, one point of reference that we should all be familiar with is the rake file, so let's have a look at that. Maybe that will tell us what we're supposed to do. This is the whole rake file that you get, right? What I really dislike about this is that there's nothing I can do with it without having to go and learn all about Ho. The only hint that it's given me is where I should put my name and my email address. And Ryan Davis has made every other decision for me. And who am I to disagree with that? Anyway, so there's no, what do you do? I have no idea. I have to go to the RDoc or to the web, or, like find some other poor soul who's in the same position as me before I can even do anything beyond what's basic. So there's a learning curve involved with using Ho, but what's even worse than that is that Ho is a fucking virus. I absolutely hate this aspect of it. What you'll find is if you install a gem that was created using Ho, you're going to get Ho as well. You'll see it being installed. And that's because Ho has such a stranglehold in the creation of the gem, it adds itself as a dependency, because why wouldn't you want Ho? It just immediately pisses me off, right? So, I mean, I should qualify this by saying that Ho was a fucking virus. It's not anymore, because there's this new thing in Ruby gems called development dependencies, so you don't automatically get this stuff. But that only applies for new gems that are created. We still have a bunch of legacy gems that have been infected by this virus. So it's too late, right? Ho, you are dead to me. Okay. What else can we try? Well, so there's New Gem by Dr. Nick, which actually reminds me this talk should be called Gem That by Dr. James Adam. But anyway, we have New Gem, which is kind of like very much a product of like the post-Rails Ruby development world. And it completely embraces the style of programming that's all about generators and having like my computer generate things for me. So let's have a look at what happens when we try and use New Gem. Okay, so there's still a bunch of stuff in there, like what's postinstall.txt? I have no idea. Do I need script console? Do I need script generate? Am I really making something like that? And it's obvious that New Gem is kind of trying to be comprehensive in terms of the kinds of libraries that it's going to support. So you can do anything. You could be building Rails with New Gem, and I think that's probably what Dr. Nick imagines that you might be doing. But it seems a bit like overkill to me. Anyway, so let's have a look at the rake tasks that we get. So, by my count, that is 34 rake tasks, including, but not limited to, posting to a blog, installing the gem locally, but without RDoc, because you need a rake task for that. And this is mental, right? Printing a list of email addresses of the authors for the gems that this gem depends on. I'm pretty sure that I'm not going to need that. But we're still not done, right? This is the simple mode for New Gem. We can provide it with like additional generators that it's going to go wild with. So let's just go, completely crazy. Now it's generated me a website and subtests and cucumber features for code that I have not even written yet. Thanks, New Gem. That is awesome. I'm kind of speechless because all of a sudden this little idea that I had for a library doesn't seem like it should be a gem. It seems unworthy of all of this support. I don't need it. How can my tiny 10-line bit of code really warrant all of this to support it? And so at this point, you start to lose your grip on reality, but Dr. Nick's thought of that because he's got a called release sanity, okay? So, that's just, I'm speechless again. There's one good thing about New Gem, and that's that every website that New Gem generates has a link to Paul Backley in it. And that's awesome. It's just a shame you had to do a deal with the devil.
It's not actually to my website. It's one project.
Yeah, it's to the Ruby to JavaScript project that you've abandoned, but that has a link to your website. So the page rank trickles down.
Page 3 for Paul.
It probably is. So what now? So those are kind of like the two sort of classic contenders. Well, we could go to Echo, which is like a fork of Ho, removing this kind of evil virus-like dependency aspect, and it doesn't provide a generator, so already it's 1 point with me. But instead of that, you have to add these 2 lines to your rake file. Now this is still incredibly opaque. So how do I set a description, or how do I add any dependencies? Well, eventually you'll figure out you have to do it a bit like this. But to figure that out, you still have to dive into RDoc or go and search on the internet. And even then, it's not terribly simple. For instance, to set the version of an Echo gem, the only way to do it is to go into the changelog file that it expects you to have and add a line with the version number on it. And the only way you can find this out is by making the mistake of trying to do it. It's just mental. And even this is even worse. Even though the primary purpose of Echo is to not be a virus, if you want to include any other rake tasks without it blowing up, you have to wrap the Echo thing in this funky begin rescue block so that it doesn't complain. Otherwise, people have to install Echo. So the whole premise is kind of a little bit shonky. Either you need to install Echo and have everyone install it, or you need to use this kind of crappy code to make sure that it doesn't blow up when someone tries to use your rake file. Next. Right, so I've not heard of this before, but in some of the comments on the proposal for the talk, somebody mentioned GemHub, which is by a developer called Diego Carrion, and on his blog he claims to love bits, kits, and beer, but we'll try not to hold that against him. Seriously, that's the tagline, it's amazing. So if we run its generator, now this is kind of much more sane. I feel really good about it, but then when I look closer, I see that it's telling me to write specs, and I like shoulda and test unit. I don't want to use RSpec. And the README it's made is text style, but Markdown is the one true README format. Right? I don't want to write in text style, so immediately it's like I'm weeping and saying, no, GemHub, we were so close, but we're too different. Next. So there's Jeweler, which really is kind of the tool du jour, like the top dog among the newest crop of Ruby developers. And so, I mean, let's see what it's going to do to offend me. This is what happens when you run Generator, and it's not too bad. It's like definitely not as batshit mental as NewGen is. Although I still don't really understand what .document is for. There's stuff in it, but who knows. And if we look at the rake file, we have this kind of crafty begin rescue block so that you don't have to install Jeweler. And it's wrapping stuff in this Jeweler tasks object. But the gem object that it's yielding, this is good, is an actual gem specification. So at that point, you do kind of have control over everything just by looking at the Ruby gem documentation. But then, when we look at the rake tasks that it's added, we get all this stuff like checking dependencies and releasing to gem cutter and releasing to Git and to GitHub. I don't know what the difference is. And it's a rake task to install it when I thought the gem command was going to do that for me, but apparently not. And then rake tasks to go into files and bump versions. And it's just stuff I just don't need. So while it's like hugely zeitgeisty apparently, and also apparently tailored for GitHub, although I think that just means 2 rake tasks that you could do in a single line in the command line. Anyway, it still provides this generator, and my focus has shifted away from crafting this little 10-line nugget of Ruby into servicing this Swiss Army knife tool, which is just overly capable. And it occurs to me, really, at this point, what's going on is that all of these tools are too opinionated. We have Rails to blame for this. They're not actually even for building gems. They're for managing your entire development workflow from the first idea. They expect it to be there before you've actually thought of what you're going to be building, because they're going to generate all this structure for you. So they're managing it from that to the posting a blog post to announce your latest release. It's the whole thing, and it's insane. It's just too much for me. So what I want is just a tool that is going to take some existing code and turn it into a gem, and then get the fuck out of my way. Right? Is that too much to ask? Oh yeah, right. Have you seen what happens if you try and apply any of these tools to existing code? This is brilliant. So if I try and use ho, which the command is so, which is confusing, it discovers that my code already seems to exist. As if it cannot comprehend the possibility of that. It's just mental. Right. And Jeweler, which is meant to be really good, says, oh, maybe move it out of the way before continuing. In this bizarrely passive-aggressive stance against my own programming. Anyway, so the only tool, and the reason why I wanted to keep it in the presentation, the only tool that comes close is GemHub, because as it's running, it notices, oh, right, you have a rake file. And, you know, do you want me to overwrite it? Well, no, because I've done stuff in it, so what can you do for me? Well, I could overwrite it, or I could not overwrite it, or I could overwrite everything, or nothing, or I could just quit. Or I tell you what I could do that is useful. I'll show you a diff, and you just keep that in your memory and then read it later on. We were so close. Anyway, right, so clearly I'm a very angry person. But faced with this is the reason why I felt like there's room for something else a bit simpler, and that's why I wrote this tool called Gemdis. And it only deals with one file. It's the rake file, okay? And as a result, it has one dependency, which is rake, and if you were going to write a rake file anyway, you probably needed rake anyway, okay? And the rake file that it creates only does 3 things. Builds a gem, builds the documentation if you want, and then releases to RubyForge. But in fact, actually, now that GemCutter seems to be, I think, the de facto host, I'm just going to get rid of that code because you don't need it anymore. So how do you use it? Well, assume at some point that you've created a directory which contains your project, and you've gone away and then you've hacked all of your code and stuff, and this can happen any number of times. When you feel like you have something that's useful, in that directory you just run gemthis, and it writes a rake file. And that's it, okay? Wow, all of this anger just to get to this one thing, write a rake file. And if you have a look inside that rake file, at the top of it there's your gem spec, which is as the way that God intended it, i.e. the actual code. You can go in and change that. It's all commented, so it explains this is what you should have in here and this is what you should be doing with that if you've forgotten. There's a link to the gem spec documentation at the top, which none of the other tools have. As if like documentation is somehow dirty and you should just know what Ryan Davis wants you to do with code. So we have the spec, and then fully documented, and underneath really simple tasks that come bundled with rake itself to build a gem and to build the documentation. So this is probably underneath all of these other tools, this is what they're doing. It's just that they've deemed themselves so important that you can't edit these options using the options that Rake gives you. You need to do it through some kind of wacky DSL or something else. And I think that's just bullshit, right? You can go and find the Rake RDoc if you really want, and then set the options to get the RDoc that you want, or generate a tar gzip file as well as a gem when you build it. Now, the other nice thing that gem this does is it tries really hard to work with you. So if you have a bin directory, if you have been writing a script that is going to be running from the command line, then it will hook that up for you and make sure it's included. And if you have a test directory, then it will generate a test task for you and make sure the tests are included. If you have a spec directory, it's going to generate an rspec task for you and make sure that rspec is a dependency, but that's all exposed in the gem spec, so if it's wrong, you just get rid of it. But if you don't have any of this, the worst thing it's going to do is remind you somewhere, oh, by the way, you should probably write some tests. But it's certainly not going to tell you how to do that or which tool you should be using. The other nice thing is if the project's already in Git, it will go into your Git ignore and make sure that the build products, so the RDoc and the gem, are ignored. But it's not going to overwrite anything that you've already put in Git ignore, so it isn't fucking with my shit. Anyway, so my criteria, I mean, I've shown you what it does when it generates a new Rake file. But if I've already got a Rake file with some tasks that I've been using, what's it going to do? Can you guess? Okay, I'm in this other project, and I run gem this, and it just appends to the existing Rake file. Like, how can this be that hard? All it's going to do is just put what it was going to make at the bottom of your Rake file, and you can either leave it there or rearrange it, integrate it with what you have, or get rid of it, and then it's gone. It's really that simple. Right, so that is gem this. Hopefully I've either convinced you that the tools that we have are too complicated and gem this is an alternative, or I'm an outrageous crank and I'm in deep need of medication. Or both. Yeah, it could be true. That's gem this. You can check it out on GitHub, or you can install it from gem. So the next half of this talk is kind of about gem commands. And you'll notice that so far in the slides I've been writing the gem -this command, because that's what the gem this gem comes with. But you can actually also just run gem this, which I think is awesome. It's a massive coup d'etat. If you can say, like, make it feel like it's actually a part of Ruby gems, it has a real stamp of authority. So already I think that gem this is the winner, because it appears like it's built in, and that's awesome. But anybody can do this. This is not a hack. So if you have been using Gemfuzzer recently, you'll know that you do gem push, and that appears to be part of Ruby gems, but it's not. And there's another handy one that I've come across called gem open, which will open a Ruby gem source files in your editor, and you just have to give it the name. And you can just get that. It's really useful, actually, so I highly encourage that you check it out. And so all these things are examples of these things called gem commands, and they are really, really easy to write. The secret sauce is three things. You need to create a subclass of gem command in a file that has to be called rubygems_plugin RB, and that file needs to be in the load path of your gem. So typically that means you put it in the root of the lib directory. And then rubygems will find it somehow. You don't even need to worry how, it's just going to find it. And so in that file, this is kind of a skeleton version of it. As you can see, it's really simple. There's only three methods you need to implement: initialize, summary, and execute. The one kind of tiny hiccup that I've noticed is that the name of the class, I think, needs to be something command, where something is going to be the name of the command that you're going to write. So if I'm going to do gem test, it has to be called test command. But I haven't found any documentation for that. It just breaks if you don't, which is nice. Inside the initialize method, this is again really super simple. All you have to do is call super with the name of your command, a short description, and then any default options that you want to pass. And then underneath that, you can add any options that will appear through the gem interface. So when someone does gem help test, or whatever the name of your command is, all this stuff is going to get listed for you. And I think this is really similar to the syntax used by optpos in Ruby. So it's just like the short version of the flag, the long version of the flag, a description of what it does, and then you get this options hash that you can play around with if somebody invokes that particular option. The summary command is obvious. You just provide a string that it will return, and then in execute, you just do whatever your command should do. And inside of execute, you get access to this options hash, and that will have any of the options that we passed in, and also the arguments that were given. And I think they're in args of options. But if you just run that, you see exactly what you get. And that's basically it. The only other thing you need to do is register it with Ruby gems. So at the bottom of that file, you do gem command manager.instance.register command test. So it's the name that it's going to be used to call. And it's that simple to own a piece of Ruby gems to write your own commands. So just as an example, this is essentially the entire code for the gem this Ruby command. And most of the logic has been extracted into this gem this class so that I can still support having the other binary. It's not even terribly interesting. It really is that simple to actually build these commands. And that's kind of my whole talk. The only other thing is I promised I was going to put a slide with this in, so there it is. And that's it. So it's on Gemness is on GitHub, and you can install it from Gemcutter. Please have a play around with it. If you think that it does anything wrong, it could be fixed, then just let me know. And otherwise, I'm done. Any questions? Yeah, David.
What happens if two different gems try and register the same command name?
That's a really good question. I imagine what's going to happen is that whichever gem has the alphabetically latest name is going to win, but it might blow up. I've never tried it. I don't know that this part of the infrastructure is particularly sophisticated, so I imagine it's just going to overwrite that command. Yeah?
Can you pass a custom pass name to the register command, so the register command text?
In this bit?
Yeah.
I think it has to be the symbolized version of the name of the command that has to match up with the name of the class. But by all means, play. This is just what I found that works, and when I tried to deviate from it, it did not work. I'm sharing the wisdom. Anyone else? No? Okay. Oh.
When you were looking at gem specifications, is there any super cool secret options you can pass?
Super cool. The development dependencies one is quite interesting, because you can list things like Mocha or shoulda or rspec or cucumber in that, and anyone can install it just by adding --development or developer, one of those, and it will install those as well. Otherwise, it will leave them out. So that can kind of, when I install a gem and I see it's installing a bunch of stuff, it kind of slightly, this is not surprising, annoys me. So it's nice to kind of reduce your dependencies by doing that. That's probably the coolest. To be honest, it's not actually that cool. If you're looking for cool in gem building, then here we are. So one thing I can do is if we go back to there. That's where you'll find that, on that URL. That's basically the documentation for the gem spec. And that will list all of the options, and you can find your own super cool flag to set in there. Any other questions? Murray Steele?
I wondered if you could talk a little about one.
Do you know what? I can talk about lunch. Okay, so we're here. There's food down here, which is just down the street. There's also pubs over here, and down here is a big Waitrose and some other restaurants. And so it's now lunchtime. We're going to start again at 2 o'clock. Shark, we'll just start without you if you're not here. So yeah, see you at 2.